This is a jungle cat. On n'est rien. On vient de la poussière et on retourne à la poussière. While laying on the dirt floor of a temple in Gabon, my head resting on the hide of this wild jungle cat, I watched and listened as the rain saturated everything it touched outside, and I reflected on those words. They were delivered to me by my teacher, an 86-year-old African sage woman. I was floored by her truth, literally. We are nothing. We come from dust, and we go back to dust. We are not what we know, and we are so much more than that. But we can't possibly know just how much more until we forget everything we know. Our ideas about what we know get in the way of discovering anything new. If we think we know better, we'll never know better. I believe we haven't actually experienced everything there is to experience in this world, and that includes what's possible with business. If you really think about it, even those of us who pride ourselves in our vast experiences have barely scratched the surface of what there is to know. In Gabon, a country that's governed almost entirely by indigenous rituals, I was reminded daily of how little I actually know. When I got home, I found myself standing in the rain in my backyard in Copenhagen with my bare feet in the mud, as one does, letting the earth remind me once again of just how little I actually know. This realization is the one thing I wish that someone in my 12-year career in finance had known to share with me so that I could get in touch with my own humility. We don't actually know anything, and that's not a bad thing. Humility is grossly lacking in the workplace. We've built a global culture of professionals who pride themselves on what they know and who do whatever they can to hide what they don't know in an attempt at self-preservation. In the information age, not knowing has become a threat. But what's real and what's true, and what makes us innately human, is our capacity for perpetual, internally oriented growth. This is what I call human-centric innovation, and true innovation stems from not knowing. So here's the good news. What we know to be true of who we are and what we are capable of can change, but only if we allow, our new neural pathways are waiting to be created in the brain by the second, but only if we allow them to by getting humble about what we don't know first. Talking to you about spiritual training with shamans and showing you wild jungle cat skin, suggesting that you forget your years of education and experiences in favor of something so trivial as humility, is pretty risky, especially at a forum about business and leadership. And as we become more digitalized, as jobs change, as time speeds up, as information becomes broadly available, integrating this sort of wisdom is becoming more and more important for our survival. I've learned some amazing lessons in my travel to over 40 countries, observing indigenous civilizations, as well as during my career in the financial industry. As an emotional intelligence and human-centric innovation expert, I've spent the past 4 years coaching my clients on how to evoke the genius in others. What I see in businesses today is a constant pull to look outside of ourselves for answers. We hire consultants to provide instant solutions. We rework strategy to include benchmarks of what other companies are doing. And we make decisions based on budgets that prioritize hacking growth rather than fostering it from the inside. All of this inherently dehumanizes our most prized asset, humans. And it puts the weight of value on what we know rather than on who we are. And so long as our value lies in what we know, innovation cannot happen. But, a big but, there are 5 essential elements that can completely transform and transcend this reality. All it takes is one person. And just like a ripple in a drop in the water, culture can change and human-centric innovation can thrive. Those 5 essential elements start with impact. This may seem obvious, but humans are not machines. One of our fundamental needs is to have an impact and to know that we matter. Robots do not have the same need. Some people call this free will. I call it personal power. In short, it's remembering that we always have choice. And it's a driving force in human-centric innovation and essential to fostering growth. Indigenous cultures the world over have known this for millennia, and they include rites and initiations as a means to help each member of society know their path and their unique contribution to the tribe. Personal power is instilled on members of a community as early as 10 years old. while in the Western world, we're almost constantly robbing our community members of their power, driving them to seek it out in destructive ways. We talk about value chain constantly in business, but nowhere in the structure of an organization is individual human value nearly as evident. It's not uncommon, however, in large and small organizations alike, for people to have a lot of responsibility, but with little to no power. Hierarchy, politics, and bureaucracy, sound familiar, drown out and suppress that growth faster than lightning. Without deliberate attention on the cultivation of another person's sense of personal power, we risk preventing internally oriented growth, either by disempowering them altogether, which results in complicit or even complacent behavior, or we drive them to look elsewhere entirely to fulfill their need to make an impact. In either case, businesses lose. Today, or this year, is actually the 500-year anniversary of the death of Da Vinci, so I thought it was appropriate that I would use his image of the Vitruvian Man for this next image, the cornerstone of these elements, which is resilience. Without energetic resilience, growth is actually impossible. Energetic resilience can only occur and continue to expand when we are energetically efficient, which is to say when our parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems are aligned and functioning in resonance. This is a scientific fact, it's not refutable. Too much dissonance, which is when they're out of alignment, creates confusion, and it actually distracts from a personal power, it distracts from our sense of mattering, and it also promotes helplessness. Shamans call this being out of alignment with nature. What's actually neurologically happening is that people are being cornered into fight, flight, or freeze. And it also makes people really sick. In Denmark alone, we spend between 3 and 50 billion kroner on sick leave every year related only to stress. And that number is continuing to rise. This way of being is contagious. With rampant dissonance in the form of stress, repression of personal expression, confinement of growth through dehumanizing leadership, and malaligned business priorities, we lose our ability to feel, and we find ourselves in an almost permanent reactive state. Not feeling and being reactive functions like static in the transmission of a transistor radio. It creates what physicists call entropy, and just like a positive ripple, this negative one makes up a dysfunctional company culture that runs rampant. The third element is presence, being so tuned in to the moment that a sense of time all but disappears. It's in moments like these that possibility and innovative ideas reveal themselves. Without it, we end up stuck up in our heads, recycling old ideas and expecting different results. Presence is something professional musicians are extraordinarily good at. The power of the transmission relies on the musician being present with each note. If they're not, we feel it. Part of what makes music powerful is that listening to it is an experience of someone else in flow state, and that evokes our own flow state. Flow state is a fancy word for presence. Presence begets presence. This organically creates a ripple effect. Business executives often say to me, but Antesa, I don't have time to be present. I have fixed deadlines and deliverables, and I have a hard enough time getting all the work done in the time that I do have. What most of us don't realize is how much time we waste by not being present. Our lack of neurological resonance and perceived powerlessness contribute to an enormous amount of energetic inefficiency. We're often unaware of the lost time that comes from being so energetically inefficient because we have normalized it to such a high degree. Time is indeed a finite resource, and presence is the only thing that can buy you more of it, not by making you more time, but by helping you use your time more wisely. This is a character for a beginner's mind, and it's the glue binding the previous three elements together and the birthplace and bedrock of innovation. And this leads me to your fourth element, which is curiosity. There are two different possible intentions behind what we know curiosity to be. The first is asking yourself or asking someone else lots of questions with the intention of acquiring information. The goal in this case is to feel like you know more. The second is wanting to have an experience of awe. The former is about control, and it's actually called inquisitiveness. The latter is about surrender. To truly be curious is a surrendered position. Curiosity has an interdependent relationship with personal power, resilience, and presence because it requires letting go of control, feeling safe, and knowing that you have access to your own free will. And you can't possibly know any of that from anywhere other than the present moment. I have a peer, Jaz Rasool, who says, "We think the opposite of knowledge is ignorance, but it's actually innocence, and innocence and innovation are siblings." This isn't just a concept to be understood. It's something we need to live in order to practice. I'm not suggesting everyone go down to Gabon and lay on the dirt for days on end with wild jungle cat skins in order to get this in. I do think, however, that the experience of true curiosity is something we can immediately model in organizations by starting with questioning our own intention behind our own curiosity. Are you being curious, or are you being inquisitive? Given that one of the main ways we learn is in witnessing other people's behavior, the potential ripple of asking ourselves something so simple is enormous. Often I hear decision makers at companies say things like, "I'd love to invest in EQ training for my team, but we don't have the budget for that." Well, I think we could talk for hours about that. There is a different type of currency already available in abundance that can get the ball rolling, and that's permission. Permission is not what you think it means. I'm not suggesting that you go back to your offices and with your magic wand you grant permission to everyone on your team to be empowered. That won't work. What I am suggesting stems from one of the oldest lines in the book. Be the change you want to see in the world. Embodied permission, being, awakening your own personal power, finding resonance to build your own resonance, being present, being curious. This type of embodiment acts as a magnet and will literally polarize anyone in your field to rise to meet you, and then the ripple can take shape. You don't have to be a leader to have this kind of impact. You just have to remember your humanity. In the information age where knowledge is so easy to access, it's actually what we don't know that is becoming the most valuable. Impact, resilience, presence, curiosity, and permission are our most valuable resources. And they're free, and anyone can embody them. The investment in this form of currency has an ROI that defies the current structure of industry as we know it. And it sets the stage for a new version of innovative humans that will serve to usher businesses into the future. Thank you.